Evening all. Welcome to Overview and Scrutiny, Performance and Growth. It's nice to see you all on such a dreadful, dark evening. Without further ado, we'll just start on any apologies.
So we have apologies from Councillor Slade.
Thank you. Minutes of last meeting.
So you have within your agendas the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of January. Are there any comments or questions on that, or are we happy for those to be signed by the Chair? Yeah.
Item 2, members' interests. Excellent. Item 3, Overview and Scrutiny Work Programme.
So again, within the agenda you have the Overview and Scrutiny Work Programme and the Notice of Key Decisions. We have had a meeting of the working group surrounding the appointments of external bodies and outside organisations since the last meeting, and that is progressing forward, so that will be in place very shortly. Are there any comments and questions on that item aside from that short update? No?
Excellent. Item 4, Revenue Budget, Medium and Short-Term Financial Plan.
So just as a quick introduction, this is obviously a big item. It's a key part of the year for the council. And it's actually a process that really starts the day after the budget was approved last year. There's an awful lot of work that goes into this. I think it is an excellent and robust budget, and I'm looking forward to hearing the comments of members from a scrutiny point of view this evening. So Karen's going to introduce with the narrative, and then we're welcome to take comments and observations from the panel. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be able to propose a budget to you and an NTFS which is balanced. Given the current climate when so many councils are issuing Section 114s or threatening to issue Section 114s, I'm very pleased to say we are not in that position at the moment. As I say, our budget for next year is balanced. We are showing a surplus next year of 1.9 million, and the surplus continues into year 2 of the MTFS. However, we do see years 3 to 5 drop into a deficit. But as I said, we are able to cover those from reserves, and we are presenting a budget, a balanced plan. We continue with last year's budget principle to improve our financial sustainability. Given the deficits that we have in the latter years of our MTFS, that becomes even more critical. Our local government finance settlement issued to us in the week before Christmas. They do like to tease us. Announced a 4.9% increase in our core funding. This was dependent upon us increasing our council tax by the maximum amount permitted, which you will see we are proposing in the budget pack. However, this settlement was again only a one-year settlement, and that doesn't give us the strategic certainty to be able to really develop our plans going forward. We would hope that we would get a longer-term settlement, but that is not happening yet. So that does put some risk into our MTFS going forwards, most notably around the fact that we have a general election coming up, and who knows how our funding models will change as a result of that. Our council tax funding estimates include an adjustment for the implementation of the new council tax support scheme, which was approved by council recently. However, on the funding side, we notice that the NNDR rebase has been delayed by a further year. In the short term, this is good for us. Once our NNDR is rebased, we will lose a significant amount of our funding. And whereas last year we expected this year to be the last year, 24-25 to be the last year of the current scheme, it has been pushed forward a further year, which means that we get a short-term increase in our funding in 25-26. We estimate this to be around 3.5 million. And rather taking this through our budget, we are proposing creating 2 earmarked reserves for using this. Bearing in mind our underlying principle of increasing and improving our financial sustainability, we're proposing a £1 million fund to invest to create ideas which will deliver benefits to our revenue budget in the coming years. Bear in mind, we have, keep coming back to it, we have deficits in the last 3 years of our current MTFS. 2.5 million we're also putting aside as an earmarked reserve to implement the outcomes of the workforce strategy exercise. I must stress, this is to implement the outcomes of that strategy. It's not to just give £2.5 million pay rise to our employees. But our workforce strategy is demonstrating that there are various areas across our employee investment that we can improve, not just on reward, but on our learning and development, and also on our staff retention. So if we are going to fully embrace our workforce strategy, we need to have the funds to be able to implement it. In line with last year's budget, we have included the benefits from the implementation of the garden waste subscription scheme. These, we've included the benefits and the costs in line with last year's MTFS, but we have been able to expense the implementation costs of the scheme in the current year. We're anticipating some unavoidable cost pressures, and these are similar themes to last year's MTFS. We continue with the uncertainty in the economic climate, so we still have very high costs for our utility costs. They have increased compared to last year. We have pressures coming through on housing benefits, increasing drainage board levies, and our insurance costs are increasing. These are in line with the pressures suffered by our residents as well, and so we are doing what we can to mitigate them, but we have to acknowledge that these are pressures on our budgets. We also have a significant cost pressure coming in from our disposal of waste contract. This relates to the materials recycling contract, which is a contract procured and let to us by the County Council. They have been retendering this cost for a significant amount of time, and what they are finding is that there are a decreasing number of suppliers in the market, and capacity in the market has decreased. As a result of that, we are expecting our annual cost to increase by £900,000 a year. So that has put in a strain of £4.5 million in our MTFS, but that is built in, and I know that county are looking to see if they can reduce those costs. As I said, the council continues to present a robust financial forecast, but we do need to continue our forecast on maintaining our financial sustainability to mitigate further deficits in our revenue budget, and also to give us flexibility to develop the district's wealth. We are here to serve our residents, and what we can do to improve the wealth of our district to help serve them is within our remit, and that is what we are intending to do. Finally, I wanted to touch on the capital budget. This includes the work for our existing budget projects, which are funded and actually is a considerable programme of work. No further major projects are forecast. It's partly because we already have a considerable programme of work to deliver, but also interest rates continue at high levels. We see the benefits coming through on our revenue budget on our interest receivable, but if we were to go out for funding at the moment, that will be at quite a high rate, and we will struggle to cover that cost going forwards. That is all I wish to say on the budget, and I will welcome your questions.
Thank you, Karen. It was a very good and comprehensive report. It took me some time to read it, but it was very good. I'll open the questioning up shortly. I just wanted to address one particular issue, which is very pertinent at the moment, is obviously the green bin charge. You mentioned actually that you'd actually put that in some of your calculations and the figures. So assuming that that money is used, could we possibly delay, as we've got extra money in the budget, to delay the green bin implementation?
Okay. So we started the implementation of the garden waste scheme almost as soon as it was through the call-in process last year. So we've already done a considerable amount of work on it. We introduced the garden waste scheme based upon the information that we had last year, and we still had a considerable amount of jeopardy in our budget last year. And we needed to find ways to mitigate that. If we were to stop the garden waste scheme now, it would leave a considerable deficit in our budget. Our budget includes, across all the years, £8.9 million worth of savings, which are attributable to the garden waste scheme. In addition, I will struggle to demonstrate best value because we have spent money in implementing the scheme, and that money would show no value. And plus of that, we have had considerable interest in the scheme as well. And if we were to stop the scheme or we were to delay it, then that would incur costs for us in refunding our residents. And again, I would have a challenge around best value on that.
Thank you for that. I'm sure members will have some questions further. Questions from members? No questions. Oh, Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a question in regards to under head of service, strategic insight and delivery. We can see a 668% increase based on last year's budget. It would be useful to find out why. I note in there that the employees is going up to 2.1 million. At the moment, this year, it's forecasted to be 1.2 million, so that's a significant increase. And also, the second point is under buildings, which is energy costs. Energy prices are starting to come down, only slightly, but they are coming down. So I'm slightly unsure why we're seeing that cost doubling. So it'd be quite useful to get a bit of insight into why that one has increased by such a huge amount.
Okay, I will have to come back to you with a response on the strategic insights budget. Apologies, I haven't memorised that part of it. With regards to the energy costs, there's two factors on that. The first one is that to achieve the best prices we can on energy, we buy our energy through a framework provider, ESFO, and they purchase our energy in advance, and then we get the best benefit value of that. So whilst the market may be dropping, we don't see the benefit of that drop immediately. We have to wait for that to feed through the prices that we achieve. Now, at the moment, prices are dropping, so there's a delay in that. It also works the other way, and that's a considerable benefit to us in the last financial year, where our energy had been pre-purchased at much lower rates. So we did know it's ups and downs. Secondly, you're aware of the decarbonisation work that's been happening across our facilities, most notably One Leisure. That has meant that our energy usage has moved from being gas to electricity, and at the moment electricity is more expensive than gas is. So that also has been built into our forecast energy costs.
Karen, can I just ask you to speak closer to the mic? Some people just can't hear you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Under Table 21, the Portfolio for Finance and Resources, the supplies and services expenditures jumped from 4 million to 6 million. Can you tell me why that is, please?
So that is, I talked earlier about two reserves that we're creating going forwards. To maintain control of those reserves, they are going through, corporate resources is my area. I've put corporate finance in there. So it's to make sure that we've got full visibility of those areas, so it's going through there. But also in supplies and services, it's not just those areas. We've also got the MRP calculations going through and a few other bits.
Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, Chair. So just a question about the appendix, which lists all the fees and charges. It seems that the vast majority are showing a 0% increase, and so I'm just wondering why so many of these things aren't even rising in line with inflation, given the need to kind of plug holes in the budget and so on. Just wonder if you could comment on what the policy is with reviewing those. Thank you.
So our fees and charges are set according to a number of factors. Some of those fees and charges are set and dictated to us. We have no ability to change them. Some of them we have increased, in particular the one leisure charges. You'll see there are benefits shown through the budget for those. On other charges, it's a conversation between the service and the portfolio holder as to whether it would be effective to increase the charge at this point, bearing in mind the impact upon our residents as well.
Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. I do have 3 questions, if I may. The first one is just touching back on the green bins. You mentioned, Karen, that there's 8.9 million in the current MTFS about the green bins, but when we spoke before, you said that the same figures are being used that came to the joint scrutiny panel earlier this year, or earlier this financial year. Because table 3 that I have with that net impact on the MTFS, even if you roll forward the 4th year to be the same in the 5th year as we spoke about, that comes to 6.6 million. And if all the implementation costs have been put in this year, that's another 850,000. That still seems somewhat short, about £1.5 million difference between the 8.9 million figure. I didn't know whether there was an explanation what that difference was.
So the difference is that we've kept the figures in the MTFS as they were last year. But when the figures came to overview and scrutiny in the summer, we had included an allowance for costs which may have been charged to us by county to do with their main, I can't remember the name of it, their main waste contract. However, those costs weren't levied against any of our neighbouring councils who have already introduced garden waste. So we haven't there's been no further discussion on those, and we haven't built them into our budget expectations. We've kept our budget expectations how the MTFS was.
Thank you. My second question is about the council tax base. And I see that the council tax base has projecting to go up by 264 this year, which I guess is I think later on there's Councillor Ferguson's report about the number of new council tax banded properties in the district is going to be up about 1,200. So I'd expect that to be roughly the number of the base going up. But then if you take off the adjustment for the council tax support, I assume that's how we get to that 284 figure. I'm more interested really in years 2, 3 and 4 going forward, that increase in the council tax base, because previously in last year's MTFS you had the base going up by between 12 and 1,300 a year in each of those 3 years. But in this year's MTFS, it's only going up by 700 and something. So we're losing out about 500 equivalent Band properties from the base each year in years 2, 3 and 4 of this MTFS. Now, I can't believe that we're going to have an extra 500 properties that are going to be subject to council tax support. So I wondered what has been the basis and behind the assumptions being made to get towards those council tax base figures.
So in calculating those figures, we liaise with our colleagues in the Council or Tax and Benefits Department. They have noticed that in previous years we've overestimated the amount of new households coming on board, and so they've gone back and reviewed them. They've also taken account of the economic climate and the number of houses being built, the forecast that they have for that. So, all of these factors are considered in reaching their figures, and we did challenge them, but we feel that those are appropriate figures to include.
Thank you, Chair. My final question really surrounds. Sorry. Yes, it surrounds the growth bids in Table 2B, where we have by portfolio the growth bids. And I just wondered whether you could give some indication of what the growth bids for corporate and shared services, 262,000, finance and resources, 108,000, 81,000 in planning, and 113,000 in regeneration and growth, please.
So the answer is I do have that detail. Can we go through them one at a time? Sorry, I struggled to remember them as you were going through. So in corporate resources, we have some assessments around the rent on our commercial investment strategy. Rent reviews coming up, and we have a couple of empty properties at the moment, which we've discussed previously. We have some small amounts in there for improving the streaming in here, and also looking at facilities management, carrying out remedial works on non-compliant fire doors. The implementation of the workforce strategy, we have got additional project managers in place for doing that. And also, so I think you mentioned finance as well. Within finance, we are looking to bring in some additional resource. With the amount of reporting that we need to do, we are struggling at the moment. Trying to work out which one is in regeneration and growth. I've got my table. Can I come back to you on that one? Because my table is built up in a different way, sorry.
Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chair. Table 7, the subjective analysis, there's one figure that stands out which shows a significant increase in expenditure. That's on communication and computing from 1.26 million to 260k. Can you explain the reason for that difference? Thank you.
Sorry, could you repeat in which area?
Table 7 for under supplies and services. The second element is communication and computing, where we see quite a large decrease in the expenditure.
I will need to go back and ask the... I have a more knowledgeable colleague next to me. It's apparently a reallocation of cost to a different line. So I will get the details on that and report back to you.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Cole.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just drag back to Table 2B again, Karen, if you don't mind. Looking at the inflation and employee-related growth for leisure waste and street scene at 1.2 million. Obviously, leisure waste and street scene encompasses quite a lot. Can you give us a bit of a breakdown as to what was driving that growth, please?
So the growth within leisure is predominantly down to employee cost increases and also utility cost increases. Did have it on my computer, sorry. So obviously our leisure centres use a considerable, they use more utilities than all of our other buildings, so that's a considerable increase there. Also within leisure, the profile of the staffing there means that the leisure business is more susceptible to increases in the minimum living wage, and that's increased by just over 10% this year. So that's increased a considerable amount as well.
So if I understand you rightly, that has all been driven by leisure?
Sorry, I forgot the other bit was in there, which I also mentioned earlier. Thank you for the opportunity. That also includes 900,000 for the MRF contract, the increase I mentioned earlier.
Okay, sorry, can I just come back on that? So the 900,000, the MRF contract, has that been confirmed by county at this stage, or are we putting something in there just as a placeholder?
So that is, the procurement is still ongoing, but that is the cost indicative by county based upon the tenders that they've received back.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. As a member of the County Council and a member of the E&G Committee on the County Council, I'm somewhat surprised you haven't taken into account the increasing costs from the County Council with regard to waste disposal, because we were informed as members of the County Council on that particular committee that HDC will be charged the increased costs that occur to the County Council because of HDC not having so much waste through the green bins, i.e. less recycling. So you will, as far as I am led to believe, the County Council will be charging HDC any loss that it has in its recycling. So I'm surprised that we're not covering that. I'm even more surprised that the County Council has not informed you to this date. But that is what we were told at a recent County Council meeting. So that's just a point that I think you need to go away and come back and let all councillors on this committee know, because it is something that we should know before we move forward with various things. And then the other thing I do find quite odd in this day and age, on tables 14 and 24, with regard to leisure and health and training and planning rather, we have got nothing in the budget for training, which I find absolutely extraordinary, how we are not training our staff going forward in the 5-year programme. Can you explain why that would be?
There are two answers to that. Firstly, training is a centrally held budget, but also it's one of the things that we are considering as part of the workforce strategy.
Sorry, Chair. He's muttering and telling me. But on other services, you do put training budgets amounts. So it seems inconsistent for not doing it for all services. That's what I'm saying, really. If you put it somewhere else, I think you should have spread it out across so that we could have all seen that we are doing training for all our staff, which I think is essential.
So it may well be that some of the other services have very specific training that is part of the ongoing need, but for those services, their training comes out as part of the central budget. But as I said, no, we are reconsidering this as part of the workforce strategy, and that will be part of our ongoing thinking.
Thank you, Karen. I do agree, actually. It does seem anomalous that some departments have training and some don't, but okay. Are there any other questions? Councillor Coley.
You thought you were going to get away there, didn't you, Chair? So, Karen, just to come back to the 2.5 million workforce strategy budget, could you just give us a bit more detail, because that's a heck of a lot of money, and I'm sure it's all well accounted for, but what sort of things will be spending that on? What I'm concerned about, and I'm sure some of my residents will be concerned about, is it's not going into the pockets of consultants as much as sometimes these amounts do.
So I can't tell you at this stage what it's going to be spent on. That's our estimate of what it could cost. But the workforce strategy, as you're aware, hasn't yet been agreed. It's still being developed. And until we understand what those outcomes are going to be, we can't start modelling how we're going to use that to invest in our staff going forwards.
So again, as I understand, then it's a bit of a placeholder, and we think it might be about 2.5 million. It could be less, it could be more.
Yes, we're putting it into an earmark reserve, but you're aware the workforce strategy is going through the formation and decision process at the moment. So until that's complete, we don't know what the agreed outcomes will be.
Following on from that, Karen, obviously Councillor Colley and I are on the Employment Committee, so yes, obviously that part of that discussion would obviously impact there, and it would actually be discussed there, I'm assuming, yes?
So I'm aware we've got an Employment Committee next week, and there is a workforce strategy update coming to that.
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Karen. Oh, sorry, Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you. It's just firstly a compliment. I'm delighted to read Karen's assurance that the council has a sound financial base. So that was good news. Thank you. And just to follow on, I think from Councillor Pickering, Councillor Corley's comments concerning One Leisure, I thought that was partly counterproductive, because we're the service designed to get us active, less strain on the health services in general. So I was actually very surprised at slightly alarmed at the increases. Thank you.
So there are some unavoidable growth increases in that area, but we're also doing an appraisal of the business operating model, and that includes increases in our fees, but also looking at how we are delivering the services going forward, which we expect to deliver savings.
Thank you, Karen. If there are no other questions, I'd like to thank you and thank the team for the budget. I think it's excellent. I'm also remind everyone that, we're not out of the woods. You've also identified quite a lot of risks that are actually coming up. So it's watch this space. And then obviously we'll see how things move on. But thank you and the team. I'd like to move on to the next item, which is Treasury. Thank you.
Just while we're waiting for Oliver to join us, I'd just let you know I'm aware it's a little bit warm in here this evening. It has been turned down, but it does take a little while to come through, so it has been noticed. Just will take a little while.
It seems a little bit unnecessary to introduce Oliver. I'm sure all of you are aware of his expertise. and his attempts to turn what is a really complicated subject into something that's a little bit more accessible for everybody. So again, I will hand over to our subject matter expert, and I look forward to the comments from the panel. You're on.
Evening. Thank you for that introduction. This is the first report from the Treasury for 24-25. So this is the strategy. This tells us how we're going to manage our cash flows, how we're going to manage our borrowing, lending, tells us about our prudential indicators that we're going to look at through the year when we report back quarterly. It's also telling us about revenue costs that relate to capital as well in the MRP statement. So there are three particular areas that I wanted to highlight where we've made some changes this year. The counterparty limits, which are the limits on us where we place money with other organisations, have been slightly increased. So I've increased the bank counterparty limit from 2 million to 4. Also the local authority 2 million to 4 million, and also the money market funds from 4 to 5 million. The logic behind that was to give us some confidence that we could still maintain our interest levels throughout the year. We're expecting interest rates to drop. So that will give us some more places where we can place investments. It will also mean that we can place investments with strong counterparties because they're often asking for more than 2 million. So if we were to use these limits, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for stronger counterparties. It gives us more choice over where we can place it. We're also been discussing previously about ESG investments, and my discussions with Link, who are our Treasury advisors, informed me that often those counterparties are looking at something more than 2 million, something nearer the 4 million level. So that will also give us more choice if we at some point wish to do those investments. At the moment, we're not looking at that. We're happy with keeping our money in the DMO and money market funds, but this is thinking ahead about what's going to happen when the interest rates start to fall. My final point was, we've got those limits, but we won't necessarily use them. If we look at our current lending at the moment, we've got some limits of 4 million, and often with money market funds, we're down at 2 million. So it's not something that we're necessarily going to start putting money into, but it allows us some flexibility later in the year. The second point I wanted to make was an additional table that I'd put into the investment strategy, which is Annex A, which is the list of investment properties that we've previously discussed. We wanted some more detail on those, so that's been included. Anyone that has read through that table will have noticed I accidentally put a date in the middle column, the gain and loss column. That shouldn't be there. So we've got valuations at the end of March 22 and valuations at the end of March 23. So we haven't got 24s yet. So that's some additional information that's been included. And the final thing really was interest rates. So at the moment, bank rate's 5.25. The forecast that we're getting from Link is suggesting it might be down to 3.75 at the end of next financial year, so March 25. And in the longer term, 3%. So the thinking is that half of next year is going to be kind of like this year, and then the second half is going to be falling interest rates. So we're likely to see less interest receipts next year, but they're going to hold up in the first half. But what we've seen in the past is that the forecasts have been put back. So where the rates are going to drop have been pushed back. Depends on how inflation's going to drop over the next few months. And that was my 3 points I wanted to make. So any questions?
Thank you, Oliver. Are there any questions? Councillor Blackwell.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Oliver. Just a couple of points. I did smile on page 129 when you suggested that interest rates will remain high. Probably giving my age away here, but my first mortgage was charged at 3 times 5%. So I think higher than previous might be an appropriate wording. But I did, and also I did appreciate the forecasting from Link Group as well, that we may see a reduction to a sort of more modest 3% by Q3 next year. Okay, and secondly, just to thank you for your details of the property portfolio, because I was unaware that we'd actually gone north as well with property in Wakefield. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. There is a point that I wanted actually to bring up, because I read the report and I thought it was excellent. I really thought it was really good, but I always enjoy them anyway. And was obviously about the proposal for training for overview and scrutiny. Don't look like that, Oliver. You know, I'm sure members would actually be grateful for any additional training in terms of Treasury training. And I'm getting some nods around the table. So, and I know that it is actually in the document, and I would just like to know, do you have any plans or anything in the pipeline that we would perhaps like to see?
That's something that I'm going to investigate. So I'll put it in there because I think it's a good idea. It's also something that the Treasury, the publications that we get from SIPFA suggest that we should be doing. So it's a subject that I don't think is, it's not too difficult once you get into it, but it looks more difficult than it is. So yeah, what I'm planning to do is to investigate how we can provide that training. So I know that Link do provide some training. They'll come in and do some, but I don't know what the cost of that is yet. So I don't want to leap into that one, but yeah, I'll certainly be coming back with something in the next financial year.
Sorry, timescales. Your next financial year is an awfully long time. Come on.
Okay, I will look at it and we'll do something. I don't know. I'm not sure how quickly we can program it in, but.
So what I'll do is I'll bring it to the next Treasury Management and Capital Management group. We'll have a little bit of a chat about that and what we can do. We'll see whether or not we can squeeze some budget out of Karen. And we'll come back to this group next month with a proposal.
Can I be asked if Oliver manages to organise some training for overview and scrutiny, could we also extend that invite to our corporate governance committee as well? Because I think they would benefit from it.
Councillor Howell.
Thank you, Chair. The commercial investment strategy has a number of properties in our portfolio that are outside the district. Can you clarify what steps will be taken to monitor those investments, please?
So there's been a bit of a question around the whole commercial investment strategy side of things. Liz Welbeck joined us, Wellborn, 7 months ago now, has been going through the entire portfolio. There is an awful lot there. She has a really good report that has a lot of interesting information in it, which what we want to do is there's a couple of bits that still need to be refined, but we want to bring that again to the corporate governance and to this scrutiny panel. And we want to do that probably in the next few months. Probably need to make it a closed session because obviously there'll be elements of commercial in terms of rentals and valuations of certain aspects of that, but we're looking to do that within the next couple of months. And that will give you the answers to that, but also then give the opportunity to contribute into that broader strategy. It's also important to remember we have the commercial investment strategy work that we're lining up for first couple of quarters of this year as well, to think about what we do next with that money.
Thank you, Brett. Oh, Karen.
Sorry, just to add to Councillor Mickelber's response, Also, if you have a look in the Treasury Strategy papers, particularly Section 5 or Appendix 2, that talks through the risk factors. It talks through the properties that we have, the risk factors of what we apply, and how we consider those things. So these are long-term investments, and therefore, any decisions need to be made over the long term as well. So there's a number of factors that we consider with those.
Yes, I'm all into managing risk. Excellent. Any other questions? Oh, Councillor Jennings.
Thank you, Chair. Just firstly, to reiterate your remarks, I think it's an excellent report and very interesting to read through. I have a question, really, which I think I may have heard the answer before, but I think it'd be really useful, perhaps for if a layman was looking at this paper and looking at the commercial investment property portfolio and the gains losses that have been made in a year. It would seem, if you had no Treasury knowledge, that a jump of doubling the value of the Rowley Arts Centre in a period when some of those buildings are not actually being used might raise eyebrows. Could you perhaps just speak in layman's terms about what's driven that, and are there any practical implications from having a higher valuation on our books that members ought to be aware of?
Yeah, I think we've spoken about that before. Rowley was a property where the rents were reduced during COVID, so the valuations of those properties are based on the rent flows rather than the market. So that would be why it's leapt up. We hold those on our books as long-term investments. So if we were in a company, we'd be looking at the gains and losses because that would form part of our profit or loss. But for a council, we're really more interested in the rental flows. I think perhaps maybe I ought to. Is that sufficient?
If I can just add to that, the increase in value that you're seeing in the paper now is a reversal of the decrease in value that would have happened when the rents dropped. The rent is effectively the future order book of those properties, and anyone who looks at company valuations will know that the future order book and the certainty of that has an impact upon the current value of the asset.
Are there any other questions? Well, thank you, Oliver, as ever, very helpful. I look forward to seeing you next time. And again, thank you. Thank you, Karen. Item 6, Corporate Performance Report.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm very pleased to report this quarter's corporate performance report. Quickly going through the report, I think that most of the indicators are extremely positive. I think John just told me, I think 19 out of 26, was it, John? Performance indicators are showing an improvement over their numbers from last year, which goes to show that we are continually improving. Most of them are green, lots of them are amber, but I do have one concern. So we've always said that we treat this like a car dashboard, and when the amber lights go off, you need to take notice of them, and when a red light goes on, we have to take double notice of them. So the one that gives me the biggest concerns are PL3 and PL4, which relate to the amount of time required to install disability facilities adaptions in people's homes, which have been red and amber for as long as we've been monitoring these reports. Previously, we've put the blame on Places for People, and we thought we resolved that problem. But again, Places for People are also being named in this report as one of the causes. Now, these are obviously complex schemes in which we're only one cog in a complicated machine, because we have to work with the landlords, sometimes private landlords, sometimes people like Places for People. We have to get permission from them. We have to work with the contractors. We have to work with Cambridgeshire Home Improvements Agency. But if you look at the numbers, we've set a target of 200 in a year, and we're now projecting that's going to be 170, which we talked about last time. But this gives me a great concern. I've also been involved, so it's easy to talk about the numbers, and I've hand waved before these away, saying there's lots of moving parts and we can't influence all of them. But I think we need to do a better job of trying to influence those, because I've been involved in some casework with Councillor Harvey, which lots of the pieces and parts aren't working together, and it's something I think we need to pay some attention to. So yeah, I think the performance across the board is really good, but those measures PL3 and PL4 at the moment are giving me some direct concern. Do you want to?
Very little to add on that. I think the overall performance is good across the organisation. Looking at those performance metrics, I think the wider perspective as well is also the update around the corporate actions which sit within the corporate plan as well. Most of those are green, fewer amber. And similarly, when we look at the performance across our project portfolio as well, good evidence there, I think, that supports that overall assessment of a council that's working well at this stage. So that would be the other aspect I'd bring to the table. The metrics are one part, the actions and the projects are another component of our activity as well. So no further things to add. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I read the report and I agree. A lot of the actions are green. A couple were amber, which surprised me. One of which was the Market Town paper, because I was under the impression that was completely up to date and everything was okay on that one. John, can you just clarify that one for me?
Yeah, so Market Town's programme is a portfolio of projects. There's a whole set of activity that sits within it. And when you look at the report, and we've got 5 of those that are currently on track. Some others where we've had to reprofile some of the activity. So the overall status is an assessment effectively of a fairly wide-ranging programme of activities. That's why it's flagged at amber. It's also something I think that's been through this panel as well before. So the winter update, I think, came in December, and I'm sure there will be further, more detailed opportunities to examine that as well in future. But that's the overall status of a basket of projects. I think amber's a fair reflection of where we are.
If you're referring specifically to the St Neots project, I'd invite you to come and visit, Chair, as well, because I was on Market Square this afternoon. I'm sure Councillor Jennings will agree that the pace of progress is really quite fast as well, and it's taking some residents a bit of effort to adapt to it as well. So the trees have been removed. Lots of the block paving, which has been called cobblestones before, has been removed today, and it really is moving quickly. So yeah, I think the St Neots project is on track, but there are other projects in this portfolio.
Councillor Jennings. Oh, sorry.
I just have one point on that Market Square, the Market Towns project report. I'm hoping it's a typo, and I'm looking at Councillor Wakeford in the gallery, that he hasn't sprung something on us. But it says that the works on the Priory Centre are proposed to begin in August 2028.
I don't think that's correct. Can we just table that while I look for a facial response from Councillor Wakeford, and maybe a nod or a shake of his head when he's ready? No, it's correct or it's incorrect. So he will give you a response at the next meeting or before, I think, is the answer to that. I'm not sure about that.
Thank you for that. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. With the DFGs, I'm just wondering if it's possible to set up some sort of working task group to look into this and see if we can improve things.
So I'm an engineer, and when we've got complex machines, I think one of the things we need to do sometimes is pull them all apart and look at all the individual bits to make them work as well. So I would agree that I would appreciate the help of a working group to look and help me look at all the moving parts on disability facility grants. If that's the way we can do things, I'm not necessarily familiar with the democratic vehicles by which we can do that. So perhaps if I turn to Democratic Services, maybe you could suggest how we might be able to do that. But I am in favour of the principle.
Yes, that's certainly something we can look at, and I will check, as I believe it falls under the other panel under Environment, Communities and Partnerships, but I'll investigate on that, and I think John might want to add, but we'll get together and we'll sort that out with the officer as well. But
Yeah, thank you. I think is a very sensible step. Just a couple of reflections, I think, really about why that's a sensible thing to do. Councillor Ferguson's right. We've been reporting for each quarter that we've not been on track with these performance metrics relating to disabled facilities grants. He's also right to say that reflects back actually onto the community and individuals. So I think it's a really good thing to bring forward for further examination. I think I'd also repeat back to the panel as well. I think this is a really good demonstration of the performance management framework. So that document which you approved before Christmas, which we talked to you about in January as well, is actually talking about the mechanics of looking at performance data, evaluating it and taking steps through the democratic process to go into that and to look at it. So really welcome that. I think one of the things I'd also perhaps put together for the task and finish group to look at is I think it'd be really helpful to use the kind of the sort of corporate plan approach, do enable and influence. If you think about disabled facilities grants, there are a number of components there that our officers do directly, but there's also people outside the organisation who we enable and work with, so places for people, for example, and there's a whole section, I think, around influence as well. So this is a government-funded grant. We may be able to take some steps around influencing that. So I think when the terms of reference are drawn together, very happy to support that, officers and the team standing by to do that. But I think that kind of reflection of how we do the work would be really good. I think it would really stretch the way that we work. So yeah, I think it's a great idea. Thank you for bringing it forward.
So can I ask a question? Are we going to add that to the work plan then for the other group?
Yes, that would be my proposal. I will check it just to make sure that we've got the right details together. But yeah, that would be something, and we can bring that up at tomorrow night's meeting under the work programme item.
It does sound like it's a pretty meaty piece of work, actually, because of the complexities and the stakeholders involved. So good luck with that one. Councillor Martin.
Thank you very much, Chair. And again, I know we've said it at every meeting so far this year. This is such a big improvement on previous years, the presentation in particular. But again, I'm going to bang on about more data. And PI3, at the moment it's saying that we're in the red, and obviously it's not very good that we are as low as we are in comparison to last year. But there's bits of data that would be quite handy for me to know how important this is. So we've completed 122, but if the backlog's only 5, then we're doing okay. But if the backlog is another 122, then it's an even bigger problem. So it'd be quite useful to know what the backlog is, how many are sitting on our worksheet at the moment, to know how, because 5 difference isn't a huge amount, but if it's more than that, then I want to see from you guys, from the administration, what intervention is happening and how we're trying to turn this around. But without that information of knowing the baselines, it's very important. It's very difficult for me to sit here and say, what on earth are you doing? Because we don't know.
So what you're asking for is better context, I think, and I'd agree. I think something we wouldn't necessarily have to put. I think putting more charts and lines could be counterproductive, but we've got quite a good commentary section now where we could just say, like you said, the backlog is this many, which would help with context as well. So I'd support that completely, and I'm sure that Dan Buckridge, who writes these reports, will be watching this now, because I know he will be. And so we'll add that as a suggestion for this, and again for any other reports that you think are missing context that we could easily find. I will happily add that as well. And like you, obviously, I'd like to see much more data, but we have to think about other people.
Councillor Pickering.
Thank you, and just I'd echo Councillor Martin's comments on the format of the report, which is so much easier to read and digest these days. But just to add my own comments, so I have just about got used to reading these reports with 4 tabs open so that I can follow the appendices side by side. But if there was any way that these could be brought together into a kind of a single report so you could read each section, that would make it so much more readable than it is currently. But really, like, super well done to those who pulled it together, because it's providing a lot of information now, which is really clear to read. So thank you. My particular question is about the We Are Huntingdonshire website, which is referenced a few times in the report, and there are references to an update being underway. So I'd love to know what's being updated on the site and what improvements are being made, but also a comment that it says that the updates are complete for the public-facing part of the site, but there's still quite a large banner on the site that says it's undergoing a refresh. So that just seems to contradict what's stated in the report about that update being complete. So I just wonder if you could clarify what's happening and where we're at with those updates. Thank you.
So in terms of detailed answer to that, I can't give you that, but I can come back from other officers. There is a programme of work on We Are Huntingdonshire, and for background for other members, this was a website that we set up during COVID. It's a website which is there to link members of the public with all sorts of different providers and organisations across public and voluntary sectors. It's a gateway for them to provide information and access to services. So it's one which is very much focused on the customer rather than individual organisations. That was its whole way of working, and during COVID we did an awful lot of activity through it. As part of the community strategy work, it is something that's being revisited. I must say, when I read that, I assumed the work had also been completed. So I will take that away and come back to you in terms of the specifics of when that website, the new version of it, will be up and available for members of the public to use. So I don't know the answer to that sat here today, I'm afraid, but I can certainly find out for you.
Thank you, John. Councillor Cawley.
Thank you, Chair. This is a great report, and I do love the way it's a much easier way to read. My comment would be it's very green, and we've always said this. It's very green. Is there any value in us? I don't know how you do this. In the area that I work, I produce these sorts of things, but I also have somebody at my back who's independent of me, sort of checking my homework, as it were, somebody in another place altogether. I just wonder if we're a bit too, relaxed about marking our own homework here, and perhaps would there be value in us getting somebody external to kind of look and just maybe give us some challenge, just check that we're up to the mark? I'm not suggesting for a minute that we're not, but I think in terms of stretching ourselves and going to the next stage, I don't know if that's been considered.
So I think it's a good point, and it's a fair point, and it comes down to, it's not down to the measures themselves, it's down to setting targets, which is always arbitrary, isn't it? And I think we all want to use those targets to improve performance, but what we don't want to do is set targets which are too high and demoralise people. I used to be a 5k runner, and I'm never going to beat my 5k PB. It doesn't motivate me anymore, it depresses me. So I think that's definitely the case. I think the good news is we've got an independent peer review coming up, and one of the things they'll be looking at is our corporate measures and corporate reporting as well. And so that would be, I'm really interested, because I think we've worked really hard on this stuff. I'm quite proud of it, but having some more guidance on setting those targets would be helpful, and the appropriateness of those targets as well. We're also going through a review of the corporate plan at the moment, and we'll have some slightly updated measures, and as part of that, I guess we'll be reviewing the targets. We've looked at some of the measures so far. We haven't looked at setting new targets, but I agree with you guys. They have to be challenging, they have to kind of push performance, and it's quite boring for me to have to present a report full of green. It'd be much more interesting for us to have a discussion about the things which aren't performing as well as possible. I hope I haven't given John another hospital bill now.
No, you haven't actually, thank you. The other point I'd add to that as well is just to refresh members' memories about last time we were here, we were talking about the OFLOG, the Government Office of Local Government, which does produce and is adding to almost every month its metric set. So there are measures there available from every single local authority from across the country on a set of measures. Already we are presenting to you a number of those metrics that are part of the OFLOG data set. So I think 9 of our current measures are already published on that OFLOG data set. We will be using that benchmarking in our target setting in the coming years. So we'll be able to look and see where we perform against national measures, but also we can filter those data sets to look at what are called near neighbours, similar authorities to ours across the country, but also our neighbours within Cambridgeshire as well. So that whole kind of set will be looked at from that benchmarking perspective. So where we are will be something that we'll be bringing forward to members as well. So you get that extra detail of information.
Thank you, John.
Chair, with your indulgence, could I please answer Councillor Jennings' earlier question? I've had a message from Councillor Wakeford who has pointed out that the papers say the work is starting in 2028, and that is wrong. Councillor Wakeford is claiming that's a deliberate mistake to make sure if Councillor Jennings was reading his papers, and you seem to have passed that test. So the 2028 figure is wrong, thankfully. It's 2029. No, it's this year. It's this year, which is 2024. Yes.
Councillor Blackwell.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I've got a few grammatical things that caught my eye. I don't know whether, Becky, I need to direct these to you for amendment. Page 262, we've got MAD, which I assume is meant to be and. Progress update, item 27. Item 28, Internet of Things. Some odd wording here. And page 316, I think it describes Huntingdon as a great, encourage people to want to live in Huntingdon, but I think it's meant to be Huntingdonshire, the whole district. Okay, thank you. And just following on from that, I too wrote down that I felt this was a sea of green, and particular areas that I wanted to query. PI 17A, percentage of household waste reused, recycled, composted. We've marked ourselves at green at a reduction of 58% when we went as high as 63.2. And secondly, my old chestnut is the staff sickness levels, which are linked into the workforce strategy, which obviously we're trying to address and reduce. But again, we're already marking ourselves at green when we've got a lot of work to do. So I just felt in both cases they should be amber. Thank you.
So staff sickness, I can deal with that first. I think the answer I'll probably give this month, similar to the one I gave last time. So in terms of the numbers of average sick for the workforce, this is in line with typically what's seen across other local authorities with a similar workforce. So the numbers are broadly the same. It is still something that receives attention from officers. So the process that we have in place for any member of staff who's sick is we have a number of sickness triggers which are used to intervene with that member of staff based on short-term and long-term sickness. We have a number of active processes to manage those members of staff back to work. And that can ultimately, if it is not fulfilled and worked its way through forward to that member of staff leaving the organisation. So there are robust measures in place to deal with sickness across the organisation. The nature of the workforce does trigger some higher levels than you might see in other types of organisations as well. So the high degree of manual work that's done by officers within waste and some of our leisure staff can lead to some more different types of sickness that we see. So those are contributing factors to those numbers. I think a couple of things I think we will take forward. The workforce strategy actually will pick up on that. You're quite right around that, around our sickness. There's a whole set of activity to come on the final work stream within that, which is all about well-being. So that's about encouraging staff to have a really broad assessment of their well-being, fitness, diet, health, all sorts of stuff that we can do to encourage people to be fit and healthy and able to work. So there will be a set of activities that will come through that well-being approach. And I think the final thing that we're also proposing and working through at the moment with Cabinet is around this particular metric as well and how we present it to you. So we are currently debating next year whether to separate out long-term and short-term sick as well here in this statistic, so that we'll be able to see the influence of long-term sickness on the average for officers. It can be heavily inflated by a number of really long-term absences that we sometimes get, particularly with staff with long-term health conditions that do need to be managed. So that should give you, I think, hopefully better insight into that data, and I think that will be hopefully more useful. I think the short-term sick is where we really keep our eye tight on it. Long-term sick is much harder to deal with, I think. So that should hopefully give you better data, I think. So that hopefully will come through. The first question, sorry, was related to the household waste collection, sorry.
Yes, thank you. Reduction to 58%, but still marked as green. Thank you.
So household waste is one of those cyclical measures which change from season to season. And I think the commentary points out that during December we don't usually collect much organic waste, but at other times in the year, in the spring and summer, we'll be collecting more. So it's almost like an expected dip, and we will expect as the year progresses and more garden waste is including, that we will increase that number as well. So the projection is that we'll finish in green, but if you look at the marker on the graph, it's currently orange, but that's almost an expected dip. So I think as we have more information on these things, we'll be able to make the target line vary in relation to the kind of expected cyclic nature of the thing. But I think it's a fair projection at the moment, and we're not expecting to miss that mark. On regard to the grammar, the Internet of Things is indeed a thing. It's how I work in the Internet of Things. It's about devices talking to the internet and gathering data, and I have never willingly recommended people move to Huntingdon because I think they should move to St Neots instead.
Are there any other questions? John, oh, sorry, Councillor Pickering.
Thank you. One of the PIs, which is Amber PI 6, the average number of days to process changes of circumstances for housing benefit and council tax support, and that's predicted to remain Amber. I just wondered, what are the particular challenges around bringing that down to the target number of days?
So there are a number, I think, that are connected to that. So one of the main components of this is that when people's circumstances change, we need to gather evidence from them to prove those change of circumstances. So whether that's employment, whether it's change of address, whether it's change in the household, the legislation and the guidance from DWP, which we have to follow to be able to present and give those benefits to individuals, has to have those proofs of evidence. So some of the delays are due to just getting that back from customers. We work really hard. We have different ways of accessing that information. But those are some of the reasons why it's quite difficult to drag that PI back sometimes, because you are dependent on customers effectively giving us prompt responses. We do a lot around that. There's a lot on the website about that. There's a lot around online access to services. People can submit those changes online. 90% of our changes circs come through the website. So it's done in electronic ways wherever it can be. But occasionally we do just have to push customers to give us those pieces of information. So that's why it's sometimes hard to drag that PI back. There's also, I think, and you'll see the way the chart is shaped, some seasonality in this data as well. So typically at year end, we get a whole set of notifications through from the Department of Work and Pensions around individuals which have to be processed. That's why we get that spike at the start of the year. Once they're then worked through, we revert more to a business as usual type of activity within the service. So that's why we get that kind of hump at the start of the year. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a feel for the battle that the officers are working through.
Thank you, John. I mean, I've got, I noticed actually on the projects one, there was a bit of an issue with Amber for the procurement rules. It's been Amber for a little while, hasn't it?
Give us a second to find that one. It's I think it might be an action, I think, rather than a project. Is that right? Sorry, Chair, could you just point that one out to me again? I'm just struggling to find that one.
Try again. Okay. It's appendix, well, I've got it as Appendix C's projects, and it was procurement rules. I think it was development of the procurement rules, and it was, I think it's been stuck like that for a little while. But if you haven't got it, you can always get back to me on that. So,
I think rather than guess, I'll come back to you with a proper answer in slower time. Thanks, Chair.
Are there any other questions? Oh, Councillor Pickering.
Thank you. I've just got one more question. So in the narrative introduction to outcome 2, keeping people out of crisis, there's some really good news about some funding for a new problem-solving officer, and I just wonder whether you could say a bit more about what the kind of role and remit of that person will be.
Yeah, thank you. So that is a good piece of work, actually. That's from some officers within my own service, from the communities team. So Rob Mitchell works very closely with the police. We work with them on all sorts of activities. So it's generally connected to antisocial behaviour, towns, parishes, rural areas. It can also have some impact on things like litter and also around fly tipping. So there's all sorts of activities that are planned through that. At the moment, the grant funding has come through from the Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, Rob, and I think the local police service are working through how best to deploy that. So at the moment, the money's there. We're now just working our way through exactly how that's going to be delivered in practice. But actually getting that cash and winning it from another organisation is great. It means we can convert that into our own priorities and our own activity. So when I know more, I can come back to you on the specifics.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, John, Councillor Ferguson. Very helpful as ever. At that point, I'd like to call an end to the meeting and thank everyone for their time and efforts. And I'll see you in March. Okay, thank you.